Nobody becomes an opera singer from Hamilton. I don't care how many Italians live here. Ardra Shephard, Fallosophy. This is AMI Audiobook Review. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski. Whoa, Hamilton catching strays. Ardra Shephard is a award-winning blogger and podcaster. She's the host of Tripping on Air on AMI Audio, the creator of AMI TV's Fashion Disc, winner of the 2023 Screen International Global Production Award, and she recently published her memoir called Fallosophy, and made time to come on the show. Ardra, thank you so much for making time, and congrats on your book being published.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
So, you've had a blog, a very popular blog for a long time. So you've had an audience, you've had your platform. Why did you need to write this book?
I started blogging in 2015 and it resonated with people. And so a book felt like the natural progression out of that. And it's been a really exciting process to be able to do that.
So what can people expect to get out of your book when they pick it up? Like, what are people going to get?
I hope they're going to laugh. I hope they're going to, good. I'm glad. Yeah. I mean, I think it's philosophy. So there's some life lessons in there. I hope it will make people think differently about what it means to be disabled, to have a chronic illness, life with MS. For the MS chronic illness audience, I hope that it will help those readers feel seen and and really to have a laugh and make you think a little bit.
Okay, so I think this might be important for people who might be interested in this book. Like, who is Ardra Shephard? Because this is your memoir after all, but I think it's good to know a little bit about the person before you pick up the book.
That's such a broad question because I think publicly I'm known as somebody who has MS, who has this presence, I guess, as an advocate for disability, but we are all so many things and so much more than one thing. So this is a memoir about my experience with MS, but I was just saying this yesterday, that I think all of us have multiple memoirs in us. Like this is one that focuses on the MS part of my life, but I'm so many more things. I'm an aunt and a friend and a traveler and all of these identities that come together to make up a whole person. I don't know. It's a hard question to answer.
I love that. Everyone's got a memoir in them. Everyone's got interesting stories, even if it's just like a part of your life, just a month of your life.
Yeah.
You don't need to be 80 to write a memoir, write an interesting memoir. You've had a very interesting life because you were diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at what age again?
23.
At 23. And that shaped your life up until this point. You've been involved with AMI quite a bit in a couple different ways. And you get into that in this book, but right off the start of the book, like one of the first things you get into is your story of being diagnosed when you were 23. And you had this pretty unsympathetic doctor kind of tell you in a very cold manner.
I don't know if I would characterize him as unsympathetic, but certainly neutral. And I imagine
neutral's
I imagine it's got to be a really difficult job to tell people like your whole life is not what you think it was going to be. Like to give that kind of information on a regular basis. I do have some empathy for how taxing that must be on human beings. So I do describe that doctor as Dr. Poker Face, really that kind of neutral. Again, I don't think it's that he was unfeeling. It's got to be tough. And I learned maybe right from that first day of diagnosis that like you have to have a team to support you in different ways. Like it wasn't up to my neurologist to kind of hold my hand and give me a hug and make me feel better about it. Like that's what my mom was for, if that makes sense.
And that's such a good point. And because that doctor, their job is not to be your emotional support. Like you need your people there. You do end up kind of being on your own in this, and you have to deal with your frustrations and your anger on your own. And in the writing style, I sense this tone of serious frustration as if you put yourself like back in that mindset that you were back at the time. And I know that you're a very like even keel person through your work at AMI. So I'm wondering if that tone was intentional. At least that's my interpretation.
This kind of like pissy tone I think that I have had is probably a reflection of my frustration of just how much as patients, especially with a condition like MS, it is incumbent upon us to figure a lot of it out on our own. And it's tempting maybe to blame that doctor, but it's a whole system where we don't have enough time. If once you are living with MS, you might get to spend 20 minutes a year with your neurologist. And that's not enough time to cover this disease that can affect your entire life and lifestyle. And so there's a lot of frustration of how much I had to figure out on my own, how resourceful I had to be, and how self-advocating I've had to be as a patient. And it's such a systemic problem. I can't just like pin it on one thing, but it is. I hope this book might be a tool for people to empower themselves to understand that patients who, certainly in MS, who do self-advocate tend to have better outcomes. And that can mean investing in a community of people who are going through the same kind of thing that you are, but also, advocating for the kind of care that you need, speaking up and being kind of a squeaky wheel about it, and not just taking for granted certain things, if that makes sense.
There is no instructional manual for disability.
Yeah.
There is no instructional manual for multiple sclerosis or blindness. And that feeling of being left to your own devices to try and figure it out.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Is, I think, is something everybody with a disability can relate to. And can you believe it? This is really the first time in this book, it was the first time that I really heard that articulated. And I love that in a book when I learn something new and that it immediately clicks. Like I don't need convincing. I just understand it right away. And I think most people will.
Oh,
too.
That's so nice. I love that. Yeah. Like the learning curve for MS is steep. I feel like there should be a boot camp when you get diagnosed. You should get,
There could be.
Just there's so much to learn. And that puts people at an advantage or a disadvantage depending on what kind of patient you are and what your capacity to access resources and to learn these things is going to be.
Well, this book, Fallosophy, kind of details a lot of the lessons and your change in approach throughout your life as you've learned to live with multiple sclerosis. And it kind of does serve, or it could potentially serve as a good learning material for somebody who is in a similar situation as you were.
I hope so. I think it's also one of the hallmarks of MS, which is a chronic progressive illness. It's a disease of the central nervous system. So I like to say whatever can go wrong might go wrong. It's one of these things where, it changes over the years. And it really, one of the hallmarks of living with this disease is your ability to cope with uncertainty, because you never know what symptom you're going to wake up with potentially the next day. And that, I think, is also kind of life in general, right? Like coping with uncertainty is something that we all have to do and get comfortable with.
The title, Fallosophy, what do you mean by that?
So many things. My blog is called Tripping on Air. MS has affected my gait and my balance. So before I was diagnosed, I used to get teased for being, the clumsy girl who would trip up the stairs. And then once I was diagnosed, the joke stopped too close to home. But that's a symptom for me, is just falling down kind of over nothing. But it's also a trip through life and an adventure and all of these things. Fallosophy is kind of playing on my propensity to trip and fall, but it's also about picking yourself up again, whether that's literally or metaphorically, and how we learn those lessons and what we take from them and how we just kind of get on with life.
There's something I want to go back on, and that's like you mentioned it earlier, and that's that people with disabilities, we kind of have to figure this out on our own. And I don't want to understate that point because it's a huge part of this book. Can you give us examples of why that's the case and how that ends up manifesting itself?
I think because in my case, with my disability, it can affect every part of my life, my relationships, my work, my home life, my ability to travel, to do recreational things. It's so all encompassing that how could anyone possibly figure that out for me and tell me what to do? I mean, we definitely need more roadmaps and examples, but just from a practical standpoint, I don't think have the resources for that to be super reasonable.
It would need to be a 5,000 page
which is like overwhelming, right? Like sometimes people will ask me, if you could go back to your newly diagnosed self, what would you tell her? And I feel like it doesn't matter because she wouldn't have listened or believed anything. But it's also this overwhelming feeling of like you can't learn it all at once anyway. And a lot of stuff you kind of have to learn by going through it.
So in this book, like what kind of stories can people expect? Because there's some memoirs that are very story heavy and others that are observation and very cerebral. What kind of memoir is this?
I think it's story heavy. It's very much in the style of my blog. So essay style, this thing happened to me and this is what I learned from it. And this was maybe what was funny about it. Yeah.
That's very popular with publishers, where at the end of memoirs, at the end of chapters in memoirs, they love to have a lesson. Publishers absolutely love that. And speaking of the publisher, I've been curious about the editing process. And you don't have to share everything. How much editing went into this? What was it like for you to have your work, it sounds like a dirty word, tampered with?
I had no idea what to expect. So I was really pleased when the publisher told me that I had, what did she say? She said that I kicked first draft ass. And I was, first of all, I was like, first draft? I'm like, I feel like I wrote this 100 times, but it was fairly painless, actually. I really enjoy the editing process. It was helpful for me to work with somebody who had not experienced MS and disabilities. So that was helpful to see where I needed to articulate something to a non-disabled audience a little bit more clearly. I also enjoyed the process of having to maybe defend something that was being questioned. At the end of the day, it's still your book and you do get final say. So you take that feedback with a grain of salt and you accept the suggestions that make sense to you and you kind of defend the ones that you want to stick by. Mostly for me, it was like, I'm going to swear here and I stand by that.
There's some things you can dig your heels in, right? Like you always have the option of going back to the editor and saying like, I really don't want to change this.
Totally.
And it has happened on this show before that I asked somebody that same question and they were like, honestly, I think the book was better before the editing process.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's so sad. Oh, no, I don't feel like that at all. I super appreciate my editors who helped me clarify things. But it was not very taxing at all. I think and
editors, they're there for a reason.
Totally.
Right?
You can't see it you need a little bit of distance from yourself. There's things you can't see. I don't feel that way at all. I feel like my editors help me make a better book for sure.
Sometimes what you'll see in books is that it needed more editing. You're like, that could have been cleaned up a little bit. Like, it's that second look at your book, that second opinion, because and maybe you can speak to this. Do you ever get lost in your own writing, where it's like it's almost like you write it for yourself or without the intention of anybody else writing it? And
Oh,
can that be
yeah.
problematic?
Well, I mean, I kept a diary my whole life without the intention of ever writing a memoir. And those diaries were super helpful for me in writing this book because I referenced them. And, I don't remember what or how I was thinking exactly the way it happened when I was 23. But if I go back to those diaries, I can find that voice and see exactly how that went. And so that was really helpful. But it is a case of, telling yourself the story first and all the details, and then weeding out what doesn't serve the story for sure. And I think blogging helped me get good at that so that I didn't need a ton of editing. And I mean, there's over 100 essays on the blog, and my writing has definitely improved since I started that blog. But it's a really interesting process. I really like editing.
And your writing is very distinctive too, which is not something you can say about all writers. A friend, you have a very cutting, like funny sense of humor.
Thank you.
It's a very entertaining read, honestly. I want to bring up a story you brought up, and it had to do with you were in a car with someone and you were talking to them, and after they learned that you had multiple sclerosis, he said that he has a sister that has multiple sclerosis, but that she always stays at home and only talks to her online friends with MS, which that hit so hard.
Yeah.
I'm kind of relatable, to be honest. But this bit got me thinking about so much, and I'd love to know how you reflected on that moment and how you think about it now.
That was somebody that I had been working with who had given me a ride home, and my illness was invisible or non-apparent at that stage. So I had been keeping it quiet and not telling professional colleagues, feeling like, it might be used against me, or I might be seen in a negative light. And during this car ride, I felt like, for whatever reason, I felt like it had been a really long day. I was really tired. And just, I felt like I could share. I felt safe enough to share that information. And he was like, "Oh my God, my sister has MS." And then I thought, "Oh, he's going to get it." But then he didn't. He dissed her. He was like, she's nothing like you. She sits at home all day and only talks to her internet friends. And I was just like, ugh, it's not like, you don't get it. And it kind of reinforced for me, at least at that stage, that I didn't want to share my diagnosis. I didn't like being compared to somebody who was being judged to not be handling their illness as well as this person thought that I was, when they clearly didn't understand the spectrum of MS and how it can affect you. And this was this guy's sister, it was a drag.
You would think that there would be more of outreach on his part to understand where his sister is coming from.
Yeah.
And to say that comment and not predict how that would come off to you, like this comparison of one person with another person that has a similar disability, like
there's so gross. Much of that in MS. There's so much of that, and there's this pressure to be like the palatable patient, the plucky, optimistic, like person who doesn't let their MS get the better of them. And I really bump against that because I get that compliment a lot, but there are a lot of days when MS gets the better of me. In fact, this interview, we are recording it a couple of weeks after it was originally scheduled because I was not feeling good for the original on the day when we had first planned.
And when you're having a bad MS day, you didn't hesitate in saying like, I'm not up for it. And I think that's something with people with disabilities totally understand. Was that a learning curve in understanding when you could and couldn't do it? Did you ever
it's still a learning
push yourself
curve.
When you shouldn't have?
Constantly.
Heck, suppose it's always a learning curve.
Constantly. Right? I mean, this is an interview with AMI. If you guys don't get it, then, who's going to get it?
Yeah, I think the bar is a little higher for us, honestly.
But it's constantly, it's a constant negotiation of, how much do I rally? How much do I push myself? how much is like, yeah, it's a constant negotiation and measuring of what the stakes are. And that actually can be true regardless of what somebody's accessibility policies are. We're not really in a place yet where there aren't consequences to disclosing your medical details and information, whether that's personally or professionally, unfortunately.
And I wanted to bring up that story of the conversation you had with the guy about his sister with multiple sclerosis, because it illustrates that you're not afraid of talking about these complex situations that aren't strictly black or white, right? And I'm wondering, what was the most challenging part of writing this book?
The most challenging part in terms of like what kinds of stories to share?
Yeah, how about this? What was the most challenging part for you to decide to put out there? What was it difficult for you to share about it?
It's tough because when I started blogging, I really wasn't finding the stories about MS that I thought would be helpful for me. And so the very first post or article that I wrote was actually about self-catheterization, which feels like this super personal, private, cringy, horrible thing to talk about. But it was very practical information that I needed, that I wasn't getting. And I knew other people needed to hear it, that I could not be the only one going through it. And I thought, if I'm going to put myself out there as a writer, what can I say that isn't being said? And so, and that's how I started that blog, with that sense of like purpose and intent. And the same was true of the book, because there are plenty of books out there about MS, and I hadn't found one that really spoke or resonated with me. And so it's almost like addressing the most cringy, hard to talk about stuff was the stuff I was the most motivated to talk about, because I knew it was what I needed. And also, writing about it and being public about it took the power away from it being able to be something that other people could diminish me by. I felt like this is like, I'm not going to let the world tell me that this is something that I should feel ashamed of and secretive about. Like, everybody needs to empty their bladder, and it's just like life. Grow up, get on with it.
It's owning it.
Yeah.
It's, instead of letting it be shameful, just own
Exactly.
it. Like the opposite of pride is shame.
Yes.
There's no reason to be shameful about things. Right?
Exactly.
And that bit about the self-catheterization, it's going to sound weird, but I thought it was fascinating. I didn't know anything about that, but I thought it was so interesting that the way that the medical professionals taught you how to do it ended up being not the way that you would do it, because you figured out a way easier way to do it. So I think you're the one that should be writing the manual on MS.
Yeah, I would do it. I think it's, right. But how helpful would it have been for me to read that chapter, before?
Because you did it for years the really challenging way. Eh?
Well, medications that weren't working, that were giving me side effects, that were, just like really limiting my life. And so for me, it was like a really great solution, a really freeing thing. And now I've been using a catheter since 2006. Like, I don't even think about it. It's not an issue.
This is an audiobook show, and this book will be available as an audiobook very soon. Is that right?
Yes. I can't give an exact date, but I will be recording it later this month, April and May 2025. So sometime this year is what I would expect.
So you're recording it. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, I'm really excited to do it. I think there is a little bit of maybe reluctance in the audio book world. I'm not a trained voice actor, but I feel like this book is literally about my voice. So I'm really excited to be voicing it.
Did you have to fight with the publisher to do that? Because they tend to want somebody with like a vocal training. That said, you did have a podcast and you were a host for an AMI TV show. Like that definitely counts for something.
I mean, I think you have to be like really famous to voice your own book without like having to make a case for it. So I definitely did make a case for it. And my my print publisher really had my back on that one. So I'm excited that it's happening.
Memoirs is one of those genres that really leans heavily into having the authors read their own books. It just makes sense to hear the voice of the person who's telling the story. It feels more personal. It's almost it's more like a podcast at that point.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think so. We'll see how the process goes. I think everything these days is probably about money. I'm probably saying too much, but it's probably going to cost more in editing, right? To use a non-trained voice actor to voice it.
That's a good question. I'd love to ask a producer if that's the case. Somebody who flubs a lot, if that's just going to end up costing more.
Yeah. It's been really great actually working with this publisher, Douglas and McIntyre. They are committed to making this book as accessible as possible. It is also available in large print, and I think it might be actually their first large print book. So that's really exciting too.
Nice to see that they're actually putting effort into it. I'd love to see more books be available in large print like that.
Yeah.
And Ardra, thank you so much for making yourself available for this interview. Congratulations on the book publishing. That was awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
That was Ardra Shephard. She's the author of Fallosophy, a memoir that's available now. The audiobook is coming soon. That's all the time we have for this edition of AMI Audiobook Review. AMI Audiobook Review airs weekends at 1 p.m. Eastern on AMI Audio and repeats every 6 hours. But we also make ourselves easy to find. We're on all the big podcasting platforms, and that includes YouTube. So you can subscribe to the channel and like our videos while you're there. You can email us feedback at audiobookraview@ami.ca. We love getting to your feedback. You can also join us on Instagram at AMI Audiobook Review. It's not just for plugging the next episode too. We're posting reels of our best moments on the show and exclusive content as well. Thanks for tuning into AMI Audiobook Review. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski. Happy listening.